không sao, không sao. Đây. I think we have to wait until he comes in and tell us what to. Yeah, the chairperson. This is the first time I met him though, and he is very young because usually the other Disputas, the chairperson is like the head of the
like the gray hair person.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah. Then you have to turn off.
members of the scientific committee, candidate, supervisors, family, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this doctoral defense at the Faculty of Biosciences, Fisheries and Economics, UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Before we begin, I would like to inform you that this defense is recorded in real time so that people who are not present here can follow this defense. Master of Science in Energy, Environment and Society, Minh Nhat Pham, born December the 5th, 1994 in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, will defend his dissertation for the degree Philosophiae Doctor in Social Sciences. Pham graduated from University of Stavanger, spring 2020. In April 2020, he applied for the PhD program in social science at the Faculty of Biosciences, Fisheries and Economics. Following acceptance of his application, he was enrolled as a PhD candidate at the UiT under the supervision of Claire Armstrong, and Norwegian Fishery of College main supervisor, Karianne Bråten, AMB co-supervisor, and Maria Tuomi, AMB co-supervisor. Pham's research, as presented in his thesis, was supported by the MONEC project, founded by the Research Council of Norway. In December 2024, Minh Nhat Pham submitted his thesis for evaluation. The thesis title is Bioeconomic Analysis of Norwegian Reindeer Husbandry in the Face of Crowberry Encroachment. The Faculty of Biosciences, Fisheries and Economics appointed the following scientific committee to evaluate the thesis and conduct the examination of the candidate. Professor Martin Quass, University of Leipzig, Germany, first opponent. Institute leader Dr. Anne Borge Johannessen, NTNU, second opponent, and Associate Professor Thuy Pham, Norwegian Fishery of College, internal member and leader of the committee. The committee has unanimously agreed that the thesis is of good scientific quality and may be defended in public for the degree Philosophiae Doctor at UiT. Earlier today, Pham gave his trial lecture titled by the committee, Economic Policy Instruments for Sustainable Use and Conservation of Ecosystem Services. The committee has approved the lecture, and we will now continue the defense of the thesis. In the first part of the defense, the candidate will provide a presentation of the main results and conclusions of his thesis. After the presentation, there will be a break for 15 minutes. Members of the audience will be given the opportunity to oppose questions ex auditorio under the defense of the thesis. However, only questions reported to me during the break will be allowed. Master in Energy, Environment and Society, Minh Nhat Pham, you now have 45 minutes to present for the committee and the audience a summary of the research reported in your thesis. Please come forward and take the stand.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Minh Nhat Pham, but you can call me Victor. Today, I want to present with you the result of my 4-year PhD project, and it is called Bioeconomic Analysis of Norwegian Reindeer Husbandry in the Face of Crowberry Encroachment. Before the presentation, I want to thank UiT, the Arctic University of Norway, and also thank for Professor Claire Armstrong, Professor Karianne Bråten, and Dr. Maria Tuomi as supervisors and co-supervisors in my PhD journey. I also want to thank MONEC project that has funded this PhD position. Here is the table of content. First, I will go through the background of the PhD project. Then I will go through the 4 research questions that I have posed on throughout the journey. And then for each question, I have used 1 paper to answer. So thus that I have 4 papers, and I will go through the presentation of 4 papers for the 3rd step. And then at the end, I will have the conclusion and the take-home message. So about the background, as you also see on the background screen, there's reindeers. And we're in Tromsø, Norway, and reindeer husbandry has been a central part of the identity of the Sami people. Of course, that the Sami people has to benefit from this animal and later from the husbandry as the industry. And there are many benefits from the husbandry, for example, for food, clothes, bones and antlers, the identity of the Sami people or social status. For the reindeer herders, for example, when you have the bigger reindeer herd, then you have a higher social status in the community, or also like tourism and other or other benefits. The Norwegian government started to manage the husbandry from 1978 through the first law and the first agreement with the herders. And so before 1978, it has been 100 years that this husbandry has been run as traditionally in a nomadic pattern. Until now, the government has been focused on reindeer pasture management, and the government wants to develop the reindeer husbandry and also manage the pasture in a sustainable perspective. Yet, the reindeer and the pasture management has been focused mostly on the quantity, which means that is the area of the grazing pasture, but not about the quality, which means the quality of the grazing pasture. For example, the nutrition level or how good the pasture is. Here is the map of Norway, and this map you can find on the map on Nibio or on the Norwegian map. And there are 6 colors with 6 regions, and here are the 6 herding regions in the reindeer husbandry in Norway. We have from the right to the left is East Finnmark, West Finnmark, Troms, where the place we are sitting, Nordland, North Trøndelag, and South Trøndelag. There are some more other background information about the husbandry and the current situation. So for now, the husbandry is being impacted by climate and environmental changes. The climate and environmental change issues that the husbandry faces have been addressed in the literature, mostly about ice-locked pastures due to rain or snow events. So these happens mostly in the winter pasture when there are a lot of snow, but due to climate change, that there is temperature variation, and thus that the snow turns into ice. And this inhibits the reindeer to graze on the lichen underneath the snow. So this is called ice-locked pastures problem. There are other problems, for example, insect outbreaks, and it happens more frequently, especially with moth outbreaks, that also decrease some of the vegetation that the reindeer depend on. Other problem, for example, wind turbine and herding land rights, which is also because of economic development and infrastructure development. There are also other small climate and environmental changes, but these changes mostly focus on the pasture quantity because these changes decrease the area that the reindeer graze on. But there's another emerging issue that has not been quite much addressed in, which is called crowberry encroachment. So encroachment means that something is spreading. But what is crowberry? So you can see in the background image a bit, this something looks like blueberries, but more black, more round. It is an evergreen species, which means that in winter it does not lose leaves. It is called crowberry in English. For the Latin name is Empetrum nigrum. For the Norwegian name is crackling. And this species has been studied in ecology in a lot of ecological articles, and it has been proven that they have allelopathic impacts. So what those allelopathic means? Allelopathic impacts means that with crowberry, they excrete on the leaves a lot of substances. That these substances inhibits the growth of other neighboring plants, and thus gradually this plant can grow more while the other neighboring plants stop to grow. And thus we have the MONEC project with the questions of to manage or not, assessing the benefit of managing ecosystem disservices. And thus we want to study more about how this crowberry impacts on the reindeer husbandry in Norway. So I want to introduce to you to the 4 research questions that I have posed. So first, I ask what are the benefits and detriments of Empetrum nigrum? What are the good and bads of this species, of this plant, and how can we categorize them? Then I use the 3 concepts of ecosystem services, ecosystem disservices, and nature's contribution to people, NCP. After I have answered that question by the first paper, then I come to the second question: how does crowberry encroachment affect the optimal levels of vegetation stock, reindeer herd size, and overall economic profit in a static or economic model? So I use the second paper to answer this question of developing a simple model, and then try to find it in the static perspective. Then, after I have got some results, then I went into pose the third and the fourth questions. So with the third one is in the dynamic bioeconomic framework, how do adaptive measures interact to influence the stability, shadow prices, and optimal equilibria of the vegetation crowberry reindeer system under climate change? And the fourth question is about how does incorporating the non-use value of carbon sequestration into the optimal control model alter the temporal dynamics and trade-offs of management strategies. So for the third question, mostly is improving the model a bit more and to analyze it in a more dynamic perspective and also see about the stability of the ecological system and bioeconomic system. But then we also include all the values of carbon, values of crowberry, for example, carbon, that I will also mention later in the fourth paper, and to study more about how should we do with this plant in a more like temporal perspective. So the first paper is titled How Disservices Illuminate Divergence Between Nature's Contribution to People and Ecosystem Services, an Assessment of Empetrum nigrum. So I am the first author together with Claire Armstrong, Maria Toomey, and Carrie Anna Brothen. And the objective of the first paper is to categorize Empetrum nigrum's benefits and detriments and its potential impact on the reindeer husbandry. I use 3 concepts in this paper. Is the concept of ecosystem services. So ecosystem services are the benefits that the human obtain or receive from nature, and was coined by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in 2005. The second concept is ecosystem disservices, or abbreviation EDS. So this concept was developed later due to that people also found out that natures also provide detriments or also some impact damage to people, not only the goods. And then the last concept is nature's contribution to people, NCP, which was coined by the IPES framework, and this concept tried to incorporate both ES and EDS in its own concept. And for categorizing the benefits and detriments of Empetrum nigrum or crowberry, I use the method of systematic literature review of 116 articles. So I obtained 116 articles after I have reading and sourcing and also checking for duplications of more than 400 articles. Here is the main result of the first paper. So this figure is about the number of papers studying the benefits and detriments of Empetrum nigrum following the ES, EDS, and NCP categorizations. And on the x-axis are the number of articles, while on the y-axis are the benefits and detriments of the species that I have categorized. So in here we have 11 benefits and detriments, and actually if we see about the color ES, EDS, the legend on the right, then we can see that there are 5 different colors, and in overall of 11 benefits and detriments, we have 8 benefits from crabbery and 3 detriments from crabbery. For example, with medicinal benefits, so this goes with the provisioning ecosystem services, which are the materials or the food and water or the tangible benefits that we receive from nature. So crabbery provides medicinal benefits and food services for humans. There are the 6 articles, these in the pink color, 6 articles that studied about crabbery as bioindicators, and 1 paper study about berry picking. So this is categorized as cultural ecosystem services. There are 3 papers studied crabbery as a species that can help for phytoremediation, and 3 others that studies the carbon fixation characteristic of this plant species. And what does phytoremediation means? Phytoremediation means that usually you have a land that you have mined a lot of minerals, and then later that land is contaminated. Then there are studies that found out that crabbery helps to decrease the toxicity of the soil in that land. So this is called phytoremediation. So that is categorized as regulating and or supporting ecosystem services from crabbery. There are with the blue colors or supporting ecosystem services. So these are indirect services from nature to human, not direct. So there are 5 articles studied Empetrum nigrum as species growth facilitation, and 8 papers as animal food. And with the 3 gray detriments, so there are 9 papers found out that crabbery is can inhibit species growth, and 1 paper proved that crabbery can deteriorate habitat, the native ecosystem, and another paper studies about the biodiversity depression of crabbery. So this is ranked as supporting EDS, but also that we also use the NCP framework, and also we saw that the NCP framework, they have a bit broader categorization. They have only material NCP, non-material NCP, and regulating NCP. So medicinal benefits and food are categorized as material NCP. Bioindicators and berry picking, so these are following the NCP framework, we categorize them as non-material NCP. And the others, from phytoremediation to biodiversity depression, they are the regulating NCP. So the key, some of the key results from the first paper. So there were also some literature review of this plant species, actually 3, and we are the 4th one. But then we've also found 1 new benefit of Empetrum nigrum, which other paper did not mention, and that was crabbery sequestration, the carbon sequestration of crabbery. And also we also find out, as I have showed in the graph, that NCP covers both positive and negative impacts, especially in the regulating NCP, as you have seen, but yet it lumps supporting and regulating ES into 1 group, and it can make some confusion later when people want to dig down into more further subcategories. With the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th paper, the same method I use is bioeconomic modeling to evaluate the detrimental impact of crabbery on the reindeer husbandry. And I want to talk a bit briefly about this type of modeling. So what is bioeconomic modeling? Bioeconomic modeling simply captures the ecological dynamics and economic optimization. And here we have a function that usually written in the textbook of fishery, and this is a classical fishery harvest model when you have an x dot equals to something. So capital X usually stands for the biomass of fish, and the dot on the variable means that it is the function of change. So this means that this is the function of change of fish, for example, and equals something. And there are 2 parts. The first part, it is the growth function of fish, and then minus QEX. So the minus part is the harvest function. And these changes of growth and harvest shows how the biomass of the fish is changed through time. Well, bioeconomic modeling usually also work with multi-species interactions, and one of the most simple or the first ecological models are the Lotka-Volterra ecological models. So here we still have x dot is the function, the change of x, and y dot. But then if we think of x and y are for example, X is a plant and Y is a herbivore, or if X is a herbivore, Y can be a carnivore. Then there are some interactions, and so the first function of change, for example, if we say plant here, for example, then R1x is the growth, the very simple linear growth function for the plant. Y minus E1xy is the interaction between Y and X, in which it shows that at some there is impact of Y on X because Y grazed, if Y is the herbivore, then the herbivore grazes the plant. And then with the change of the function of change for Y is the herbivore, then the growth function of the herbivore depends on how much it grazed on the plant. So this is E2xy, and then minus dy is the death rate of the herbivore. And through many literature, it has been proved that multi-species interactions are very important in decision-making process. I want to go a bit more detail about bioeconomic modeling for reindeer, and mostly is that the interactions between reindeer and lichen or some reindeer and carnivore bioeconomic models. We have the earliest one is the Gore and Skogland from 1980. So this is an ecological model, and then it was developed a bit into Daniel and Peterson 1994. The first bioeconomic models. Then we have the Moxnes 1993 and 2001. So this about so Moxnes made a very complex model, bioeconomic model for the Norwegian reindeer husbandry with Per Karinen et al. From 2015 to 2022. So there are some papers that studied about Finnish reindeer husbandry and also under climate change. And also with Johannesson et al. 2019. So this paper studies about the interaction between reindeer and carnivore, and also how livestock and social status is important to the Sami people. There are also other articles that I did not mention here. And these models, I found out that they are very complex and focus much on the ecological interactions of the reindeers, and also including sex structures and also structures of the husbandry. So the main, so in overall, briefly, the main focus of these papers are optimal slaughter strategies for the reindeer husbandry. So then there are some gaps that I have found from the literature. So first, climate and environmental changes have been studied recently in existing reindeer bioeconomic models, but not the issue of crop encroachment. At least to my knowledge, I couldn't find any. Lichen has been understood as the main food source of reindeer, as it has been mentioned a lot in these reindeer bioeconomic models, but actually it is not correct, since lichen is like chocolate to reindeer. So that reindeer actually also graze on the food source in the whole year round. The third gap is that due to the climate change and all the land use conflict, the Norwegian reindeer husbandry management has focuses on the problem of the grazing pasture, but mostly it focuses in quantity, not quality of the pasture. And supplementary feeding is a part of the adaptive measure that the herders have to feed the reindeer because of winter pasture crisis in the winter for the husbandry. And this adaptive measure was modeled for Finnish husbandry, but not for the Norwegian husbandry. And there is a slight difference between the Finnish husbandry and also the Norwegian husbandry, because with the Finnish husbandry, the animals do not migrate and do not graze around as freely as the Norwegian husbandry. Studies have not focused in controlling native invasive species and only alien invasive species. So invasive species are defined as the species that usually comes from other places by being brought by humans or by wind or something or some other factors, and it causes a massive detrimental impact on the native ecosystems. But there are also other definitions of these invasive species, as they are native and alien, and mostly modern studies have focused much on alien invasive species, but not much in native invasive species. And as crowberry is a native plant, that not much studies have focused in controlling this native invasive species in bioeconomic modeling. So here is the figure showing the differences and also the main points between my 3 papers. So with my second paper or paper 2, so I and my co-authors focus on the static optimization of the reindeer husbandry under impact of crabbery encroachment. So we developed a simple model to understand first, and because it is a simple model that we could study it we could conduct analytical analysis. And in this paper, we didn't have any dynamic interactions and analysis. But then first, so we developed into the third paper that we improved the ecological models, and thus we can have more dynamic optimization in this third paper. Also that we add on bifurcation analysis. So bifurcation analysis means that if we change one variable and one parameter, how does the system change? We also study about the non-zero discount rate analysis, and also, but we don't have temporal optimal controls because it only stated in the equilibrium how much it is optimal to for example control this species, but not in whether it changes through year. So because that I want to see the temporal dynamics of how should people act with under crabbery encroachment, the herders act or the government act. Then I developed the model a bit more into the fourth paper. Then we could use the method of optimal control, and we also include the crabbery carbon sequestration, which was one of the finding in the first paper, one of the additional benefit from crabbery. We also include different perspectives about crabbery and also non-use value of vegetation to see under which condition that crabbery should be considered as a pest or as a damaged species, and is there any cases that crabbery is still beneficial to human because it can have carbon sequestration. And also we include the non-use value of vegetation of the grazing pasture in the fourth paper. The second paper is titled Controlling the Stock or the Habitat, the Crisis of Native Invasive Encroachment in the Grazing Land of Norwegian Reindeer Husbandry. And again, me and Claire Armstrong, Maria Toomey, and Carrie Anna Brosnan are the authors of the paper. The main objective is to optimize in a static perspective the Norwegian reindeer husbandry under crabbery encroachment. The methodology is we use bioeconomic model with static optimization and the region of focus. So first we focus only for Troms and Finnmark. So within the 6 herding regions I showed before, we only focus on the 3 regions in up north. And the adaptive measures we include when it's under climate change, we include supplementary feeding and crabbery burning. So again, supplementary feeding is that the herders have to bring the dry feed into the field to feed the reindeers, since that because of crisis on the winter pasture. While crabbery burning is that the test whether if we burn crabbery and then so we can decrease the crabbery with the assumption that we can decrease the crabbery biomass on the field. And this paper is published on the Journal of Environmental Management. We have in this paper we have 5 more model variants, but today we only talk about two basic variants. So we have two for now. In the basic model, we have 2 equations of change. So V dot and R dot are the equation of change of vegetation and reindeer through time. So V and R. So V is the vegetation biomass. And then, so we have the term here, alpha V and this parenthesis. So this is the growth term of, it mimics the growth term, the growth function for the vegetation, where alpha V is the vegetation intrinsic growth rate, and then 1 minus V over MV, so those are the, helping to incorporate the carrying capacity, which is MV, into the growth function. And then minus GVR is just like, a bit like the Lotka-Vontra model, that we have reindeer graze on the vegetation, and G is the reindeer grazing rate on vegetation. With R dot, we first develop a very simple equation. So we have EGVR. So we have E is the conversion rate of how much reindeer has grazed into the function, and then minus S is the number of slaughtered reindeer. So that is with the basic model, and you can see that in this basic model we don't include any crabbery because we want to find the interaction between the vegetation, the pasture, and reindeer before crabbery encroachment first. After conducting some analytical analysis, then we improve corroboree into the model, and we call it invading model. So this is still a simple model, but then we have the third function of change k dot, which k stands for corroboree or crackling, and then k dot is equal to this growth function. And in this paper, we assume that corroboree dose Randy dose and graze on corroboree. So in practice, that Randy dose graze on corroboree, but is very, very little. So at first, we want to make it simple, and we assume it doesn't graze first. And so that we only have the growth function of corroboree here, but we have the interaction between corroboree and V through the allelopathic impacts by the term minus phi VK. And thus, so phi VK, so phi is the corroboree's allelopathic rate. And thus, we assume that the higher the allelopathic impact, or like the more corroboree biomass, then the vegetation will be decreased. There are some propositions that we have found after the analytical analysis. So first is that with MSY is at the maximum sustainable yield, then the allelopathic coefficient phi that I have just mentioned imposes a negative impact on the vegetation and Randy stocks at MSY, and also reduces the maximum sustainable slaughter volume. Second, both adaptive measures, so supplementary feeding and corroboree burning, will increase the herbivore stock at the MSY level compared to the encroachment scenario. So in the encroachment scenario, we don't do any adaptive measures. Corroboree burning decreases the corroboree stock at MSY. And the larger the allelopathy and treatment coefficients, the less treatment is needed. But then what does this mean? This means that with the numerical with the numerical application from Tromsø Finnmark, then with our simple model, it was shown that corroboree impact cost the herders around 12 million krones in net benefit, and both adaptive measures increase the optimal Randy stock and slaughter volume. So that is good. But then, when we see the first adaptive measure is supplementary feeding, then the feeding decreases further the pasture, decreases further the vegetation stock. And why? It's because that if you can imagine this year, if due to crisis on the winter pasture and the herders still feed the reindeer, so then that there will be more reindeers on the next year, and then the vegetation will have more depression. But then burning corroboree is the second adaptive measure, helps to increase both reindeer stock and vegetation biomass. So those are the key results of the first paper, or the second paper. The first one we use bioeconomic modeling. Then I go to the third paper, when climate change turns good plants bad. This is titled A Dynamic Multi-Species Model of Reindeer Herding in a Changing Arctic. So myself, Claire Armstrong and Karianna Broston are co-authors of this paper, and also a professor from the University of Tennessee, Charles Sims, is also a co-author of this paper. The main objective is that we improve the model, and then we'll improve the model from the second paper, and we conduct the dynamic optimization of Norwegian reindeer husbandry under climate change. The methodology of this paper is that we still use bioeconomic modeling and with dynamic optimization, but the region of focus now is the whole Norway. The adaptive measures, we still keep two adaptive measures, those are supplementary feeding and corroboree burning. And the paper was accepted for publication, and now it's published on the Journal of Environmental and Resource Economics last month. Last month. And so so from the ecological models, I want to show some dynamic figures a bit. So this figure is about the dynamic convergence of three species given changes in corroboree allelopathic rate. So that is the phi parameter. So on the x-axis are the time. So we have from 0 to 100 years, for example. And then so on there we have three colors. The curve green one are the vegetation. The corroboree one I make it red because it's native invasive on the grazing, and then R is the reindeer. And then so you can see that through time the ecological model is convergent, and the higher the allelopathic rate, then the more decrease of V, increase of corroboree, and also decrease of reindeer population. Here is a three-dimensional graph, and this is the convergence of the stable interior equilibrium with different initial conditions. So what those? It should be interior, not internal, my fault. But interior equilibrium means that when we have a system of, let's say, 3 species, vegetation, R, and crabbery, no one's turns 0. So all the 3 state variables or 3 species are there, or like they're positive. So it's called interior equilibrium. And then it showed that from different initial conditions through time, so those are the tiny time changes, from all the different initial conditions, the pond is still converged into an interior equilibrium. This is also show the 3-dimensional graph showing the change of showing how the change of the interior equilibrium with regard to the change of the allelopathic growth rate. So we see there are 3 planes. One is pinky or red, so this is crabbery, so it goes like this. Blue, going from right to left, is reindeer, and green one is vegetation. And since vegetation, the function of change is directly impacted by the allelopathic growth rate, that the equilibrium, the point, changed from in an interior equilibrium to a corner solution of only crabbery and reindeer. Because if you can see the vegetation, it's a bit hard to see because I didn't roll it. But then the y-axis is the vegetation, and then the vegetation just decrease until that is the corner solution. And then we go to the bioeconomic analysis of this ecological system. Then we have 3 scenarios. We call it pre-encroachment. So we assume that the phi equals to 0, which means that there is no corroborate encroachment on the pasture, no allelopathic impact, and then thus no adaptive measures needed. Post-encroachment, so we say that, okay, so now we let the parameter or the allelopathic rate larger than 0, and we see how does it impact on the profit and on the reindeer population and on the vegetation, but still no adaptive measures, just to see how much difference is the changes with and without this allelopathic impact. And the adaptive post-encroachment, the third scenarios are the post-encroachment, but then now we put into adaptive measures of reindeer feeding and crabbery burning. So here is the table of the result. And first you should see this x-axis showing the difference of the value of phi. And on the variable, we have the optimal of the state, the vegetation population, reindeer stock, slaughter volume, then crabbery population, feeding effort, and burning effort. Then we have the 3 lambda. So this is the shadow price. So the shadow price means that what does it impact on the system, on the equilibrium with 1 additional unit of the state variable. So here is lambda R is for reindeer, and V is vegetation, and K is crabbery. And with phi, it is the allelopathic threshold. And so there are some of the key results from this table. First is that with our result, we use numerical application for all Norway, and the result, the profit, the profit is really close to the net profit in 2023, was reported by the Agricultural Directorate. So of course, so we guess that maybe that the system can be, or seems to be, that maybe is in the post-encroachment scenario, not pre-encroachment anymore. So crabbery is out there and encroaching. Actually, in the project also there are other ecological studies that back this evidence. Then we look at the choice of phi equals to 0.8, and then so that in the post-encroachment scenario and adaptive post-encroachment scenario, we can see that without adaptive measures, then the profit decrease, and with adaptive post-encroachment, the profit increase a bit. But what I want to show is the optimal crabbery shadow price, because this is the perspective of the social planner, of the government, of the herders about this species. Because before the encroachment, which means that when phi equals to 0, then it's a positive, means that this plant is still beneficial to the whole picture, to the husbandry. But when there are when we put phi equals to 0.8, so when there are allelopathic impact of crabbery, then the sign of the shadow price of crabbery change to negative, change to minus. And this shows that the plant is actually not good for reindeer, because the herders get the benefit, get the profit from the reindeer. And then you ask why this is positive, and this is positive when we put the parameter phi equals to 1, and with our set of parameters, phi equals to 1 means that the allelopathic impact is too big, it is too strong, thus that V is 0. And in this paper, we assume that reindeer still graze on crowberry slightly, so that's why that crowberry still beneficial a bit, since there's no more vegetation. But of course, these are very unpractical scenarios. But then you can also see that from reindeer of 200,000 something or 100,000 something goes to only 8,000 because the vegetation population is 0. So those are the key results from this table. And from the paper, then without human intervention, so the post-EC scenario, vegetation and reindeer herd decline due to crowberry allelopathic effects, resulting in 42% loss in reindeer stock and 40%, around 100 million kroner in profit loss. Human interventions reduces the profit loss by half, as shown on the table. Crowberry shadow price is negative due to the detrimental effect on the husbandry. And also that from the analytical analysis in this paper, we found that higher discount rate leads to a smaller herd size because the herders want to make the herd smaller and get the money to invest in other places. But with the low discount rates, it will push the resource manager to conserve more reindeer but postpone slaughter. So that was some of the key results for the third paper. Then we go to the last paper, is paper 4, was titled Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, how different ecosystem, disservices, perspectives, and management decisions of a native invasive encroachment. So myself and Claire is the authors of this paper, and also another professor from University of Tennessee, Suzanne Lenhart. The objective of this paper is that we want to see the temporal dynamics. We saw that from the other previous 2 papers, we saw that we should have some supplementary feeding for the reindeer. We also should burning crowberry, control this native invasive species. But then, how long should we do it? Should we do it in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years? And even if in different years, do we do it the same every year or different every year? So first I want to see the temporal dynamics, and thus that I need the optimal control as a method for this paper. And also I include carbon sequestration as mentioned before, and we still have 2 adaptive measures as before. In this paper, I have 3 scenarios and 2 time horizons, but actually as 2 additional cases. The baseline scenario is a bit different with the other paper, is that we assume that crowberry has the allelopathic impact, is killing all the vegetation in the local ecosystem, but the herders only do supplementary feeding. The second scenario is we call it burning scenario. So now we have supplementary feeding together with burning crowberry to see how to separate the impact of burning with the supplementary feeding. And in the carbon scenario, we add on from the burning. Like we have the burning scenario plus the carbon sequestration characteristic to see whether we still burn a lot of crowberry or we burn less. In each scenario, we have 2 cases, with or without vegetation salvage term or scrap value. So what does this mean? This means that at the end time, since we go out to control crowberry and also to manage the husbandry, that we assume that things can change in a very long run, like 100 years. So we only to see 5 years or 30 years. And we want to have that at the end time, after we manage, there is still some value, like scrap value or salvage value of vegetation, which means that the social planner still, which means that the social planner favors or embrace the value of the pasture as it contributes to some supporting ecosystem services to the husbandry. And we have some 2 time horizons here, 5 and 30 years, and with 5 years we frame it as short run scenario, in short run, and then in 30 years we frame it as in long run. So first I want to show the result in short run first. So here are the optimal results of 3 state and 3 control. What those 3 states mean? The 3 state variables are the vegetation, crowberry K, and reindeer R. And 3 control variables we have on the right here is feeding, burning, and slaughtering. And this is in 5 years. And we have five cases, because we have baseline burning without V of T, so that is the without vegetation salvage term, and burning with V of T, carbon without V of T and carbon with V of T. And first I want to see the profit in 5 years. And so in 5 years we can see that with crowberry, and this so you see the arrow. So with in 5 years crowberry with carbon, if we value the carbon sequestration of crowberry, in the case carbon without VT, and the baseline, because this is a blue line also, then the population of crowberry is very huge. And also one more thing is that in 5 years, so if we burn crowberry, but we don't care about the vegetation salvage term, then actually there's not much profit to gain because it's too short. And the reason why is that the slaughter, there is not much change in the slaughter percentage of the herd structure, but then also that there is a lot of additional cost in burning. And also we found out that if we include the vegetation salvage term in the social planner perspective, then we get the minus in profit from the reindeer husbandry. But since we also include the salvage term, in total it's still positive. But then this minus can imply that in short run it might be not benefit for the social planner to burn crowberry. And why it's minus, as I have said, is that there is so much additional cost from burning that has to be taken into account. Now we look in 30 years. So in 30 years, the numbers look much better. Is that if we burn even without the vegetation salvage term, so we gain a lot of profit. So it shows that it can imply that the social planner should burn the crowberry, and also the dynamics of it is also different than a bit different than of the 5 years. And also burning. So even with VT, it's not end up in minus anymore, but now it is positive. So that is good, even though that the social planner takes into account of the value from the pasture. And also, we pass this. This is also, I want to mention again, the crowberry shadow price and the perspective of the social planner. So you can see is that there's a zero horizontal line that means it's zero. Above that line is the positive value, and below that line is the negative values. And even in 30 years, in all cases, except the carbon without vegetation salvage term, then the shadow price of crowberry, is negative. Which means that in nearly 4 cases, the social planner sees this plant as a pest. But if the social planner choose that, I want to value the carbon sequestration of crowberry, but without the value of the pasture, then actually crowberry is a beneficial species. So there's a switch between the different perspectives in how the social planner choose to optimize or choose which one they take into account in the profit function. So some of the key results: acknowledging crowberry's carbon sequestration value is crucial for an overall management strategy that balances the negative and positive impacts to the ecosystem. This value can shift the resource manager's view of the native invasive species from being a pest to a beneficial resource. And as I showed with the shadow price of crowberry, as a shadow price switches from being negative to positive. In the short run, burning crowberry may not be profitable from the numerical application we have done. Nevertheless, if the decision maker then does not control for now, then in the long run, the reindeer stock will decline, as shown also in the figures. So then the last question, that also the question of the project, is whether we should manage or not. And then so after 4 papers, here are some of my thinking and the conclusions I have. So first is that it is important that both the herders and the government are aware of the current situation of crowberry encroachment. corroborative control seems necessary throughout the three bioeconomic models. Extra subsidies required because the additional cost for burning, at least in the short run, so that the herders don't end up in minus to control crobbery. And maybe due to the carbon sequestration value, that the government should map the areas where reindeers do not graze to leave crobbery untouched, so that they can both value the carbon sequestration while control in the places where reindeer migrate the most. And thank you. So that was the work. And I was burning.
Thank you for your presentation. There will be now a break for 15 minutes. Members of the audience should return to the auditorium no later than, let's say, 13:20, before the candidate and the committee re-enter. I ask the audience to remain seated until the candidate and committee have left the room.
Thank you. JJ, cut your mem. Turn off. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful pictures.
Thank you. Do you know how to turn? Yeah. Do you know? Excuse. Do you know how to turn it off?
here like this.
I feel very hot now, Martin.
Yes. Members of the scientific committee, candidates, supervisors, family and friends, we are now ready to continue with the defense. First opponent, Professor Martin Kos. Could you please come forward and take the stance? Master in Energy, Environment and Society, Minh Nhat Pham. Will you please take your position?
Okay, so this is correct? Okay. Yeah, dear Minh Nhat Pham, dear audience, dear Vice Dean and advisors, thanks a lot for the opportunity to review the thesis and also ask a couple of questions. This was a real pleasure. I think it's a well-crafted thesis, quite impressive thesis, I have to say, with the 4 chapters, different methods, and a whole lot of analysis of an important problem. So thanks a lot for that opportunity. I took the nice pictures from the front cover, the reindeer, and from the back cover, the crowberry from your thesis. The issue that you're looking at is, let's say, from the general resource economic point of view, and a very interesting problem because you have this whole ecosystem with 3 different interacting species that you consider, and then it's also, of course, an ecological economic system. So I put the social planner here, or the beneficiary of the reindeer herding in the picture. Yeah, so you have the reflection on ecosystem services, nature contributions to people, and a systematic literature review. And I will ask a couple of questions on that first, and then you develop the bioeconomic model. And there, Anne and I shared the task a little bit that I ask questions primarily on the first of these 3 modeling papers, and Anne takes the more difficult third and fourth paper of the thesis. The other thing where in principle I would also be supposed to review and ask question according to our distribution of tasks is the introduction. The introduction really nicely introduces the problem, puts also the thesis into perspective of the, now I would say, 70 years long history of bioeconomic modeling. So I think it's also quite nice and ambitious to say that you're contributing to this long-standing field of research. I don't have questions on the introduction, so I move forward to the ecosystem services. Now, there you basically do 2 things. One is to contrast ecosystem services and ecosystem services.
Yes.
And the other thing is to contrast the ecosystem service concept that has been around for a long time and then made quite prominent by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment 20 years ago, and the nature contributions to people framework. Now, one thing is about the ecosystem services, services. The usual perspective, so that how this has been developed, is that we think of ecosystems as natural capital goods in natural resource economics, and capital goods, the general definition in economics, it's goods that deliver a flow of services, and accordingly, if we speak of ecosystems as natural capital goods, then the ecosystem services are the services that those capital goods provide. And yeah, this can be beneficial or damaging. So I would say that overall in our field, the mostly studied natural capital asset that we have is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and obviously, mostly for most people, it's disservices. For some, it's services. For I think also for Norway, let's say moderate warming would not be that bad. And then the sequence is natural capital delivers ecosystem services, and then we do the evaluation to see whether it's good or bad. So, yeah, I put the picture of the wolf because that is something in Germany. It's ambivalent. Some like to know that there are more wolves around. Some dislike knowing that there are more wolves around. So the same thing, knowing that there are wolves around, is good and bad for good for some, bad for others. And then there are other examples also for ecosystem services that are ambivalent. And then to know whether we can have to speak of a service or disservice, one would have to do a proper evaluation to see what's the case on aggregate. So my question is, when you put forward the ecosystem disservice, that basically means you know in advance whether it's good or bad. Would it be possible to specify under which circumstances one could speak of ecosystem disservices without doing this extra route of valuation?
Yeah, so I think of course, as you have said, so let's say there's from natural capital, so there will be some services, all these services, and it can be valued positive by some and negative by others. Then it will, of course, first it's based on the perspective whether there's only one person or very, very few think that these are ecosystem disservices, while others think that these are services is good or not bad. But they also that based on that we put in more context wise whether how does it link with all the valuation? Because of course, one phenomenon maybe it can be services, all the services, and not proper valuation yet. But then there can be some other things, some other literature that has shown that there can be some beneficial or detrimental impacts or relationship with others and the others. And if there are some also other articles or literature about that, the context put inside, so how those it can impact the people, the things that people have valued. So that might be that it is ecosystem disservices if it is impacting in not a positive way. Yeah. Yeah, so that is with a proper evaluation, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And sometimes one can anticipate the result of such a study. The other thing is concerning the comparison ecosystem services and nature contributions to people. That is largely coming out of the discussions in the international intergovernmental science policy platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services, IPBES, that was founded under that name, but then developed from that perspective. That is the conceptual framework that was adopted in 2015 by the IPBES plenary, where they have what they call the scientific perspective in green, where they talk about ecosystem services, human well-being, and biodiversity in ecosystems. But then they moved away a little bit, although the name persists, to also include other perspectives, and that is explicitly termed perspective of indigenous and local knowledge systems. And then the nature benefits to people, it was in the 2015 version, and now it's called nature contributions to people, to move away from the benefit to allow also that it may be good or bad. I think that's called the inclusive perspective. So one may conjecture that your conclusion that maybe the nature contribution to people framework is better suited to the case that you're studying is maybe because it's more open to the indigenous people perspective and maybe thus better suits the needs of the Sami people. Is that a correct interpretation?
I think is that from what I found out also that when nature contributes, when the new concept of NCP, there's also include both ES and EDS inside, right? But also that in the categories, they might be also a bit. So of course that when they include and they want to embrace the indigenous and local knowledge systems, then it can also that is like take on the side also benefits the Sami people, but not that without IPBES that science for now that is ignoring this indigenous and local knowledge system, but then it's just trying to officially incorporate it in. So that, of course, that nature contributions to people perspectives are appropriate, and it fits, but it doesn't have to be more fitter than the ecosystem services concept, because they also have subcategories, but there's also a bit more not mismatched, but then can be a bit ambiguous. While with ES we have the sizes that now we have much better subcategories, and also that a lot of governments have adopted the ecosystem services concept already. So for the government to change the concept, of course, not a new way of thinking, but maybe new new categorization, for example, can also cause a bit of problematic. So actually, it depends on what the problems that we are solving and what are the things, which kind of perspective or the problem that linked to some people we are doing, and then we will see whether it's better to use the old concepts, let's say, or the new ones who try also to incorporate it in. Yeah, that's what I think.
All right. Yeah. So when it comes down to measure, then maybe it's more about the specific categories than whether it's NCP or ecosystem services.
Yes, because later it doesn't have to be ES or NCP.
Yeah.
It's just
That's true.
The pot of money, and it's good or bad, and then who really benefits from it.
Yeah, this perhaps, because I've been told I should not use too much time, perhaps more as a comment, that then you go on and identify the multiple services that are somehow associated to the crowberry. Well, the general perspective on ecosystems is that they're multifunctional, so it's no surprise that even if one goes down to the level of an individual species, that there are multiple functions associated, and with the functions then multiple species. But what I missed a little bit is more the ecosystem perspective. So the services are services usually of the whole ecosystem, and yes, sometimes a particular species plays an important role, but usually it needs to be, one needs to consider the whole ecosystem to say also which are the services by a particular species, yes or no. So one question, but let's leave this unanswered, is really which services that you identify would really be not present or different if one would consider the rest of the ecosystem more properly. But in terms of a question, then the question that you ask in the first paper is which positive and negative ecosystem services are. So positive and negatively valued ecosystem services are linked to crowberry, and then you do a systematic literature review, and I can approve that's done according to the state of the art and in a very transparent fashion. My question only is that when it comes to this particular question, what are the different ecosystem services, whether a systematic literature review is the most suited method to find out. Because scientific publications need to put a particular focus. So hardly ever a scientific publication tries to be really about all the relevant ecosystem services, but usually about a specific one. Whereas if the question is about the whole suite, maybe it's better to go and somehow ask the people. And I know you have been doing this, but this has not been part of the publication. So why do you think the systematic literature review, or why did you decide for the systematic literature review?
Yeah, so at first I decided for conducting the systematic literature review is also because that I want to have a comprehensive perspective, since of course the project was framed, and also that we later I learned that there are some detriments of crowberry. But then if I just heard on one side or just go out to ask, and maybe when you ask people say that, oh, crowberry, I just pick them and making juice, for example, right? So maybe it's not comprehensive. It's not the whole picture. And I want to see the whole picture where the species are really, really bad. And if it's bad also for the people or only for the ecosystem. And it's through direct link or indirect. That's why I also said about what type of categories of the ecosystem services. So then I was thinking that maybe to do it a very comprehensive way is the system literature review. But even though that when we did it, we only search in English, not all the languages, why the range is still Fennoscandia. So there's still some limitations. So it's comprehensive, but also in a relative perspective, let's say. Yeah, but then I think that is a bit better way to answer, because now we are going out to name them, right, and to see how many articles really studied about them. Because after 116 articles, when I read, we found also that many of them is just like cited that corroboree is good, corroboree is bad, but not actually go out and do any experiment or analysis. So this is also a way to know whether that people really explored it or it's just a citation.
Yeah. So digging deeper into the mechanisms, of course, then the scientific literature is informative. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, this question basically you answered, but one element in your presentation, one element is of course valuing ecosystem services, disservices, but the crowberry population or the crowberry biomass, of course, that we would tend to think as a natural capital, because it has, you describe it by stock variable in your model, so it's a natural capital asset, and that is valued in a different fashion than the ecosystem services. Could you use your bioeconomic model to value the natural capital value of crowberry?
I think in a sense maybe, but to be honest, I have not touched much about natural capital value of crowberry, or at least it has not popped my mind on one of the main questions. But if we see as a sense like a proxy, for example, not the real natural capital value, but the value of crowberry, how it impacts on the husbandry, then we have the shadow price for, right? So then through the shadow price that we see that crowberry biomass as a whole has impacts when it's either it is without allopathic or not. Yes, but for maybe...
No, yes, I think that's okay. Exactly correct, right? The shadow price that you're computing with the model and that you refer to in your present, that is the marginal value of the crowberry biomass, and you could also use it to then do the accounting and say what is the overall damage in natural capital units done by the crowberry, the status of the current crowberry. I think that might be a very nice application of the model that you have, because this is really where you need the model, where you go from the service to the natural capital value. And I think it's one of the beauties of the model that you can do that.
Thank you. I will remember this and try to extract out and multiply to see
absolutely.
How big is the number.
I think that's maybe even easy paper to publish the inclusive wealth of the including the crowberry. Yeah, then I would like to spend maybe 5 minutes or so to talk about the model. I find it a beautiful bioeconomic model. I enjoyed very much thinking about the model and thinking a little bit about the implications. In my view, it's a beautiful combination of the competition bioeconomic model and the predator-prey bioeconomic model. So I put this here in the graph, the competition between the vegetation and the crowberry, and then one has the grazing, and that can be seen as a predation formerly of the reindeer, primarily on the vegetation and a little bit, if at all, on the crowberry. And then one has the social planner, or in your models, or the Sami people controlling the reindeer population, and in a sense, if they could perfectly at each point in time control the reindeer population, that would be the use only of the two competing vegetation species, but they cannot, so the reindeer has their own dynamic. And the other thing is that you include also the direct impact. So let's say the primary impact of the reindeer slaughtering and feeding is on the vegetation, and the primary impact on the crowberry is this treatment or the burning. And I quite like the simplicity of the model, and it consists basically of two parts. One is the classical bioeconomic model of two competing species, the flagship publication in the Journal of Environmental Economics and Management 4 years ago by Olaf Laden. I think many of you know that person, and I just transformed the two equations 7 and 8 from that paper in the notation that you're using in your thesis. And if one really compares to the two species, the dynamics of the two species in your thesis, one sees that the difference is minor. It's basically the same model, which means that, which is beautiful, right? You build on something that we have well understood for decades, where basically the full analysis has been published in 1991, and then you change the species interaction a little bit. I would not say that the That's a big deal, a little bit, of course, but not such a big deal. Then there is the fact that the reindeer, in principle affects both at the same time. So there's some kind of rigidity that is not present in the classical model. But then you also have the direct control of the crowberry biomass. Big thing is that the control of the crowberry biomass doesn't cause benefit, but it costs.
It costs, yes.
But that's one interesting one other interesting difference. But otherwise, it's beautiful. It's basically building on something that we know quite well. And of course, one tends to think it's also instructive then to go back to that analysis. Have a phase diagram. Here we have the vegetation state on the horizontal axis, the crowberry state on the vertical axis, and then I'm not sure if I took the correct parameters from your model. You always have this power 10 to -7, and I usually try to get rid of those powers and just have normal. And I can possibly have done mistakes, but it seems that without reindeer in your model, the steady state, so where the two lines would intersect, is at no encroachment. And then if one includes reindeer, then it shifts the two lines. In particular, the line where the vegetation would not change, it's shifted downwards, and the line where the crowberry would not change, it also shifted downwards, but hardly, because the impact they graze only a little. But the key thing is that the reindeer herding now has the big impact on the relative competition on the two, right? It decreases the vegetation, and it dramatically increases the crowberry. And this, of course, is the big thing about your analysis, that if you have a little bit of reindeer, it diminishes vegetation. That's the normal thing that you have in the base model that you presented today. But the bigger thing is that it increases the competitiveness of the crowberry. That's the big thing, I think, about your model, and I think this can be quite nicely understood in this kind of diagram. Yeah, and then it is combined with a standard bioeconomic model of predator-prey system. Another big Norwegian person in bioeconomic model, Ragnvald Hannesen, published this already in 1983. I think very beautiful analysis of that system. Here I've combined vegetation and crowberry into one state variable, and these are the two equations, 5a and 5b, from Hannesen's paper. And again, now you combine the Y in Hannesen, the one species is now two species in your that are competing, and otherwise things are pretty straightforward, pretty similar, and can be expressed in a pretty similar fashion, with two changes. One is there's no direct control of the vegetation. That is the reindeer. So controlling the predator controls indirectly the vegetation. Non-linearity, so the predation effect, the benefit to the predator is modeled in a slightly different fashion compared to the standard model. And then you have the supplementary feeding, which is an extra thing. But yeah, overall, I think that's a very nice combination of the two, with the nice adjustments that are needed to really capture the details of your model. So I really like it. Of course, I would have liked if you would have pushed this a little bit more and have shown how your results stand on the shoulders of those giants. That's what we appreciate, if one really works out how this is related and how this deviates from what has been done before. But my question is, which part of the model would you tend to think it's, in my sense, is a combination of the competition model and the predator-prey model? What would you think is the more important element? Is the competition or the predator-prey?
For me, I think it's about the competition, because of course the predator-prey, they are dynamics, and of course they are connected together. But then if we only have the predator-prey and we put out the competition, then it's just that crowberry is another sources, and I just lump all of type of plants into one bucket of vegetation, for example, right? And then here we want to see that since that the main food source of reindeer for husbandry is vegetation. So with this competition, how it really changed the dynamics inside. And of course, they all plays in the model, as you said. But I think that the competition here is a bit slightly more important than the grazing. But of course, the grazing, and human can also impact on the biomass of VNK.
Yeah, I fully agree. You're standing more on the shoulders of this giant than on these ones. I fully agree. This is what your analysis is primarily about, the competition between the two, and thus on the encroachment. That's the big thing. The predator, the reindeer, is so much controlled by supplementary feeding and slaughtering, that you can almost forget about the dynamics, which also implies. So, of course, I've been thinking a lot whether the Antis papers, Pekarin et al., whether this is not the better approach, because they have the details about how to manage the sex and age structure of the reindeer. But I think, no, it's not necessary, because the big story is not about how you manage the predator. The big story and your contribution is about the competition between the two types of vegetation. So, it's totally sensible and valid to simplify the population model for the reindeer and really focus on the big thing, which is the competition. Still have a bit of time, right? And maybe you're even rushing too much, but we have a few more points. Then we can, of course. That was the biology part, right? We enjoy studying the biology. That's also where the dynamics is, and we're interested in the dynamic analysis. And Anne will ask more questions about the dynamic analysis. But I'm an economist, so we should also talk about the economics of the problem, and that the economics of bioeconomic models so often is just the objective function, right? And that's true in your model as well. So we need to discuss the objective function. I've written it down here. So it's price, which is a fixed price of a kilogram of reindeer times the mass of the slaughtered animals, or if you like, they are all alike, so they all have the same mass. Then P can also be the price of a slaughtered animal. Then minus the parameter C1 times the herd size, that's the cost of maintenance, C2 times F squared. F is the rate of supplementary feeding. Minus 3 is a parameter times T squared. T is the treatment, so how often you go out and burn, or which area is burned. That implies that the marginal cost of the marginal benefit is a constant. Marginal benefit a constant, of course, always one has the possibility that one has this bang solutions. But you have non-linearities in F and T, so that helps in that regard. The marginal cost of maintaining the reindeer stock are constant, which means that every extra reindeer costs exactly the same. There are in particular, there are no capacity limits, right? You have a big enough family, and they nobody wants to, but everyone could with the same effort look after another reindeer, I think. But then I'm planning to ask you what is behind these assumptions. The marginal cost of supplementary feeding linearly increase with feeding, meaning that if there's no feeding at all, then an extra unit of feeding doesn't cost anything. And then if one has more and more feeding, the extra unit becomes proportionally more costly. And the marginal cost of crowberry treatment is the same. No treatment means extra treatment doesn't cost anything. Would you? Yeah, so yes. Of course, this is the economic part of the model. Yes, so I need some motivation. What is behind this?
Yes. So first is that, as you have just said that about the bang solution. Theoretically, I can make that linearly, and then it's just like the marginal cost of supplementary feeding, then it's just like C2, right? If it's linear, and for C3, then, for treatment, it could only be C3. But then when we solve the optimal, then later on, it will be a bang solution, which means that there are some times that they, at some points, that they will not do anything. At some point, they will do it. But in practice, it's not really practical, because they might do more, they might do less, but not do or not doing. It's not the real question. So then I think that it should be quadratic for now, and also it's also a bit helping with solving it mathematically. And also, so there's one more thing is that because of fitting, that the herders have to fit in winter, so there is a lot of struggles that they need to face on. So that might be that the more effort that they go out to feed, there will be the cost will be proportionally higher. And also with it can also be with treatment, because then the more you burn, you have to burn more and more and more to get more effort to go out, because that you have to expand the space. Yeah, so that is the intuition behind.
I see the argument for increasing marginal cost, but you have them linearly increasing, right? Without meaning there's only the quadratic term in the cost function, no linear term.
Yes, no linear term.
And my comment is that the result that you say that one should use both supplementary feeding and the treatment of crowberry in the optimum, that follows immediately from that assumption, because it doesn't cost you anything to apply the first unit of supplementary feeding. It doesn't cost you anything to apply the first unit of treatment. The optimal solution must include some supplementary feeding and some burning. You would still have no bang bang and increasing marginal cost if you would also include a constant part to the marginal cost function.
Yes.
And then it would depend, of course, on the constant marginal cost part, whether you would actually do supplementary feeding. So I'm I'm open to that assumption. Of course, simple models are beautiful. I've already stated that, but it has some direct implications for your solution. And then one question, maybe of understanding, maybe I'm just wrong, but according to the model, the total amount of biomass that the reindeer gains from supplementary feeding is beta times F times number, the R. So F is the feeding rate. It's not the amount of fodder. So I would tend to think that if you have supplementary feeding, it's really the material, the stuff that you feed that is costly. But this isn't costly in your case. It's just the rate. Let's say, I don't know. So I don't fully understand what it means that the costs are just costs of F and not costs of F times R, which is the total amount that the animals eat.
Yes, because what I can recall is that the F is the feeding effort. And so that is the term for the total gain of reindeer biomass is blood beta FR.
It can be shown as an effort, and so the feed is costless, and you need just to get it somewhere and give it to the animals, and that's the model.
Yes,
then it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know the system well enough to. I was always thinking that they have to buy fodder. But if that's not the case, if it's just effort, then it's totally fine.
Yes, it's just effort.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That clarifies this. And then, of course, for the second paper, it's a static analysis, but encroachment, the very word says it's dynamic. So could you reflect a little bit on what are the main differences from the dynamic analysis that you do then in this third and fourth paper compared to what you do in the second paper?
So for the second paper, I did the static analysis to see that only in the equilibrium at a point in time. So whether crowberry has really an impact to the rain husbandry through the vegetation, but then we didn't have any discount rate. We also don't see the dynamics, because as you can see, the models doesn't have the coupled in dynamics in the pasture, and that was the limitation. There were also the limitations. So with the third paper, then with the dynamic optimization, we can see more about how the discount rate will changes, and also the shadow price of it, right? Because before that, that also lacked of the analysis of the shadow price. Even that can also touch in the static sense, and also that. The last paper is that helped to see the temporal, the optimal efforts of control, the crowberry. So so those are some of the main differences from the dynamic compared to the static analysis. Yeah.
And the main thing is that you only can do comparative analysis of alternative ecosystems, alternative management strategies, right? Yes. How they will impact the ultimate outcome after full steady state is reached with every encroachment. Yes. That's the main thing. Shadow prices you can compute in a static setting as well. This is not the big thing. Yeah, the other thing, of course, where I would like to challenge you a little bit is, the model is beautifully simple, and this allows to obtain general insights, but on the other hand, it's complicated enough, right? It's not only the predator-prey model that is already has so many possibilities, possible outcomes, not only the competition that also has many possible outcomes, it's the combination of the two, plus some interesting economic assumptions. So you have many parameters, only few of them you can observe directly. So go and take data for those. Others you need to calibrate. Your strategy is to use parameters from the literature and calibrate others. And one argument is that there's lack of long time series for crowberry encroachment.
Yes.
But if you imagine you could go out and get the data, somebody you would find them if you would just be lucky enough in some library there's data. Which data would you like to have, and how would you use it to estimate your model parameters?
So of course I use a lot of data for my papers. So first is that so now we only mentioned about the calibrated, right? So with intrinsic growth rates, so usually we can, if we have the data of how the changes of growth in a plot, and if we have a lot of plots, so we can compute the intrinsic growth rates also. But actually that also include the death. So we have to separate it out. So it most likely it has to be in the experiment or like in the lab that you can just separate that. And one parameter that struggle us is the allelopathic impact rate, because then we still have, like, even though that there are few papers that have a lot of plots, and we know there is amount of differences in crowberry encroachment in 1 year and some like 17 years later. That was reported in the paper. But then also the gradual rate per year, it was very hard. So that with the parameter, we still have to calibrate it. But then if we have the data of all the plots, and then we go out to get the data every year, then we still can find the rate of how those it change, because it cannot be linear, right? It has to have a cap somewhere out, supposedly. Yeah. So those are the data that I would like to have, but of course there are a lot of cost to retain the data, and so that's why that we also include sensitivity analysis in the paper, and in especially the third paper, then I go very deep into how the allelopathic rate changes, because that say a lot. Like if this calibrated will change a bit, will it change the picture of the model, or the model is like kind of robust comparatively? Yeah.
Yeah, that is why I put a picture from one of the Pekarin papers. That is, of course, the nice thing about the age-structured, sex-structured reindeer population model is that many more parameters can be observed quite directly. Whereas in your model, you have the intrinsic growth rate, and you have parameters that one needs quite an effort to somehow estimate these lumped parameters. So, yeah, it's very nice from the modeling point of view, but from the estimating point of view, it's the more complicated model turns out to be more straightforward. Yeah, and then I was asking Anne for permission to ask one question that is out of curiosity for the last paper, that is including carbon dioxide sequestration. Yes. Because when I was looking at this picture here, I was thinking, what is this guy doing here? It's ruminating, I guess, and ruminants globally seen as one of the major causes of greenhouse gas emissions, methane emissions, and one of the major drivers of climate change. Reindeer are ruminants. I tried to look up the numbers. I've seen one master thesis from this university measuring the methane emissions of reindeer with lichen feeding or with supplementary feeding, and according to that, it's 7 point something grams methane per animal per day with lichen feeding, and 11 grams per animal per day with supplementary feeding. If those numbers are correct, this would be much less than a cow. Still possibly an important effect. So, like you to speculate a bit how the results may change. when you would consider the methane emissions?
Yeah, thank you for a very special question. I have never thought of that, even though that with the carbon problem, we all have heard that agriculture emits a lot of carbon, and of course cows and and methane and actually I want to dig more to see how does it be like, but I guess that since reindeer emits carbon, and if the social planner here, like either government and the herders, want to optimize it, maybe that they will slaughter more, keep less reindeer in the perspective of carbon, right? Because like you have live reindeer, then of course it's more stock for later. So that's why people slaughter calf, even though I don't have A-sex structure. But they will slaughter more, have less living reindeer. And then such that they will decrease more the carbon emission, or like capture more carbon as a way through crowberry. But then also that will be a trade-off or contradict when they also the social status as a cultural service of the Sami people. So actually this push and a trade-off force for just saying. Yeah.
But I tend to think that qualitatively it would be similar results as you obtain when just considering the carbon storage of the crowberry. One would tend to burn less crowberry. That was your result. But when you consider the methane emissions of the reindeer, that would mean primarily you would do less supplementary feeding, because that worsens the methane emissions, and it keeps the pollutants at an unnecessarily high stock level. So that I tend to think would be the results. In quantitative terms, just my first guess is maybe not so important, because the vegetation actually stores a whole lot of CO2. So that may be the bigger thing. Well, I think it's an interesting story, right? Because ultimately, also the pasture land contains much more carbon than cropland, right? So maybe that gives an edge again to the gray rangelands. But that is not the subject of your thesis. Thanks a lot. It was a big pleasure to discuss this, and then the rest of the questions, I think.
Thank you so much.
Later on.
Yeah. Is it possible for me to get your slide?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know.
I want to cite Olaf
all the
Lotten.
pictures,
Yeah.
but among us,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I thank Professor Martin Kvass for the interesting exchanges and discussion with the candidate. So now I call upon the second opponent, Dr. Anne Morge Johannessen, to continue the discussion with the candidate.
Ja, du kan stå her. Jeg kan stå her. Det er ingen problemer. Anne, du trenger å ha det på også. Ja. Så, ja. Du kan bare trykke her, om du vil ha pointer, så er det også.
Bare om hvordan jeg fikk den her.
Okay, jeg vet skal vi se. Har du settings, innstillinger? Ja, det går fint. Ja, stemmer.
Så den der...
Nei, men så du...
Ja, da har vi den her.
Ja, det har vi. Ja.
Den virker.
Nei, det går fint.
Ja. He knows. Thanks a lot. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, I just have to So I want to thank you for inviting me here to be an opponent to Victor, and thank you for your thesis. It's been a great opportunity for me to read it. And you know, I've been working on reindeer herding in a couple of projects before, so I found it really interesting. And you're actually focusing on a problem I didn't know about before I met you the first time, and you told me about it. So I think it's really, really interesting. So as Martin said, we divided the work between us. So I will talk about the paper 3 and 4, but I will not delve into the details, but rather give you the opportunity to explain your assumptions, why you made those, and limitations and implications. Yeah. So we try to, every now and then, we will lift our head above your model to try to think about the implications. So, but first of all, so this paper, number 3, was recently accepted in Environmental and Resource Economics. Okay, so what's going on now? Yeah. Or do I have to use this one?
No, but this one is for this connection. Yeah, okay.
Oh, there we are. Yeah. Which is a really nice achievement, I think, having this paper published in this journal. So that's very nice. And I just heard yesterday that you had 6 reviewers on this paper, which, I mean, you must have got a lot of input from that as well, and you're lucky to have that opportunity.
Most papers are not read by 6
Yeah. Martin, could you give me this glass? Thank you. Okay.
Anna, you want more water?
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we
That's so
forget.
polite.
No.
Thank you so much.
Resources.
Yeah. So, but this is a joint work with Armstrong, Sims, and Bråten. So I just you give a little. You have a table in your thesis, giving us some idea about your contribution. But I would like you to briefly tell us about your contribution in this paper.
Yes. So in this paper, I have some contributions. If I can recall all, but the first one is that I improved the ecological model such that to plant species, even though it is not spatial, explicit spatial model, but it can still incorporate the shared carrying capacity. So there is a work, and also thanks to a colleague that I was visit NTNU before. So that also helps a lot in overcome the limitations of the second paper, and also another contribution is that I go out to calculate the shadow price of crowberry, which I think is important because then it reflects the perspective, whether it is a detrimental or a beneficial resource or species. Yes, and and also applied the numerical application for whole Norway. In this case, under crowberry encroachment. So, of course, a lot of paper before also about Norwegian reindeer husbandry and also the numbers of total Norway, but not about crowberry encroachment. Yes. So those are some of the contributions I could think of.
And I agree on this. I think it's a very nice contribution, this focus on the vegetation and diversity in the pastures, and the degradation by crowberry, which is, I mean, because the focus usually, or has been in the literature, is the more direct effects on the reindeer population of ice cover, for instance, or earlier onset of spring. but you focus on vegetation.
Yes, more like the diet. So,
And that is a very nice contribution, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I get a little bit confused on this technology, yeah, because it doesn't work again.
But like you click next or you
No, I click.
You click going down.
I do go down, you see, but
So koksen-knappen.
yeah. So now it's okay.
Koksen-knappen du går.
Ja, den kommer, när man trycker bak så kommer den resume slideshow. Hvis man trycker där så fick jag tasten igen.
Okay. Yeah. Still, so you, when turning to your research question, and
Yes.
I mean, we have been talking about this all day, that you are focusing on crowberry encroachment, but I want you to tell me how you came up with this idea, looking at crowberry encroachments as a cause or an implication of climate change impact on reindeer herding. Why crowberry encroachment? To be honest, I didn't know about it, right?
Yes.
So how did you come up with this?
Yes. So of course, besides the fact that it was also included in the project, but then so I think it's that when we look up about the climate change problems of the reindeer husbandry. So as you have mentioned, it is about ice block pasture. So there is loss of access to some land in the winter pastures, right? Or like all the climate change impacts, for example, that the reindeers can have calves in different unexpected times. But then there is one controversial questions about whether the reindeer population really decreases the pasture, because there were some studies before, and that's what the government used to do the policies that I have also mentioned in the trial lecture. But then also that there's also other arguments that maybe this is because of land use conflicts and infrastructure development. So then that then it shifts the perspective to more of like the management for the pasture is that are there land there or not, but not about whether it is good enough for the animals to graze on. So then and also with climate change is that the crowberry is a native species and it is invasive because of allelopathic impacts, but the way it goes is very slow. It's not like 1 or 2 or 5 years that people start to recognize that a normal full biodiversity pasture is encroached, but by mostly crowberry. But it takes decades. So actually, it is some kind. It can be a wake-up call. For example, yes, if the models and the parameters we use functions well, so it's like to create more awareness that there is another problem of climate change is going on, and it should be taken on board.
I agree. So here we are. So you had this figure showing the reindeer herding areas in Norway. So, I mean, these areas, they differ in terms of climate variables, vegetation, and also in terms of the seasonal migration of reindeer. So I'm wondering a bit, because you're looking at the whole Norway in this area, this paper.
Yes.
Treating the whole Norway as the same. So I just want you to tell us a little bit about what do we know? How big is this problem? Are there geographical differences between these areas? And what do the reindeer herders say themselves? What are their experiences of this crowberry problem?
Yeah. So. To be honest, I have not. This is an interesting practical question. I did visit the reindeer herders, but mostly in Anta, So that was like in Troms and Finnmark, but not in and also Varanger and also Lingen here, but not into the southern Norway. So yeah, until now that I must acknowledge that there are geographical differences, and there were some researches before about corroborate encroachment, whereas the plots were also mostly in Troms and Finnmark. So actually that. We do not, of course, that there might be a limitation that even though I calculate the total number of reindeers for whole Norway, but we do not know for sure a bit about the way of how much corroborate is there, but with the regions that we the regions of the reindeer herders that we have talked to, and some of them start to recognize, or that their grandfather start to recognize after 50 years, for example, in Varanger, that the pasture land turned from other vegetations to totally corroborate. Yes, and actually, when I were, of course, there is not academic evidence, but when I was visiting NTNU, and then I went through the bus from the airport, I still see some pasture. It's not, of course, not pastures for reindeer, but still some lands that are covered by corroborate. But of course, for the scientific numbers to say for sure, then we lack some information about that. So that's I totally agree. Yeah, and the experiences of the reindeer herders. So the herders are acknowledged about that, but some still wonder, why do we need to control it, for example? Or some still saying that, but they still go harvest the corroborate berries. So it is also a bit of a new issue for the reindeer herders to hear of. Yeah, and yeah. And what can we expect about future encroachment based on climate projections? This we have not done. This we have not done because we didn't include the variation in temperature explicitly in the model, even with the fourth paper. But we just assume that the allelopathic rate is the same. Yeah, and of course that yeah. So this we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have questions on that as well.
Yeah. It doesn't go again. Maybe
it's simply because it takes time. You know, we talk and then it's.
Okay, but shall we? Can you have instilling? So we no, instilling of the computer. Yeah. Click here. Yep. And then you go to systems. You go to display, and then you detect and extend these displays, duplicate these displays, keep changes, and then so now it is on, and then here. So can you? Yeah. Does it goes correct? Yeah, I think. Yeah, and now so everything follows. And,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, so just briefly, you look at these adaptation strategies, feeding, supplementary feeding, and the burning of corroborate. And I just wonder why those two. Are there other measures that you could think about that you that also could be relevant? I don't know. I'm just asking you about it.
Yeah. Actually, I also have not dig very deep. Maybe, for example, in regard to corroborate, it can maybe not burning, but it can be other way of treatment. For example, like plucking or plowing. There were also some tests of if we just plucking the corroborate out, because burning will there might be a bit of slightly different effects if we burn corroborate, and whether there are also tests whether that the soil will be still nutritious for other plants to grow, or the seeds still cannot develop. But if there are other adaptation strategies with regard to climate change, but without supplementary feeding, then there's only might be one thing, that you have to keep the reindeers not migrating anymore, because if they just keep happening and happening and adaptive measures cannot help anything, then we will turn into the Finnish reindeer husbandry. That we have to keep the reindeer not grazing around so much, and then supplementary feeding will be not a seasonal thing, but a main thing all year round.
Yeah. And that brings me over to the next question. So if you think about the supplementary feeding and burning of crowberry, if you only rely on supplementary feeding, crowberry will grow,
Yes.
and you will have less pastures for reindeer. But at the same time, if you use a lot of supplementary feeding, that also does something to the way of practicing reindeer herding. And the way, as I understand reindeer herders, is that the traditional way of practicing is important to sustain the cultural value of reindeer herding. So I was just wondering if you had done any reflections on this, whether these two adaptation strategies can have different effect on the cultural values.
Yes. So as I recall, with the second and the third paper, so we also compare whether we only do supplementary and feeding, supplementary feeding and control burning crowberry separately. How much different the cost is, and for burning crowberry it is costless, and also that burning crowberry has to have the better vegetation pasture in the future, but not with supplementary feeding. So one implication can be that it is also based on some other research directly about supplementary feeding, is that this type of practice, or like this adaptive measure, is not sustainable, because then it will just change the way of life or the traditional way of practice, as you mentioned. So that is totally but we are not doing any explicit modeling between supplementary feeding or to that cultural values. But that might be
thinking outside of your model. But I still think it's interesting, because I think the two strategies are actually pointing up to something interesting when it comes to cultural values.
Yes.
Okay, so this is just from the report. I think you do a very good job placing your contribution to the literature. Your contribution is very well explained in this paper, so you do a very good job there. So what I was missing a bit was more like how important is this problem, trying to kind of justify why you are looking at this particular issue. But placing yourself in the literature is very, very well done. So turning to your model, I just want to point out that you do some simplifications, and it's just like Martin was saying the same. I mean, you have to do some simplifications, but still, it's important to kind of inform the reader that you actually do simplifications, and we know that climate change is a very
broad,
very broad, and the climate variables, they fluctuate a lot over time and so on, and you actually don't include it in your model. So it's all about just being clear on that. So you don't have a climate change effect on vegetation, and you have this phi parameter influencing.
Yes.
I mean, it's a way of interpreting climate change into your model, and how crowberry actually affects vegetation. But okay, so you do these simplifications, but have you thought about it? So what were your reflections?
Yes.
So you decided to do something and you left something else out. I just want you to briefly tell me about your reflections.
Yeah, so also with this paper and last one, so I must admit that we don't have any like climate projections, as you mentioned, or direct effect of climate change on crowberry dynamics in the model. It is not explicitly modeled, but then that's why that I did sensitive analysis of the allelopathic parameter, and also in the table that I showed that how phi change. And the assumption is that if climate change is still going on, then this rate can be higher because the plant is an evergreen, and then it is one of the first plants to start to grow after like in the beginning of the spring. So then with climate change, and if there is fewer winter days, so that we assume that also that the plant can grow much more aggressive, and thus the allelopathic rate can increase. So that was the assumption that I made. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, so we have been talking a lot about these relations, actually. So we just jump further.
Yes.
Yeah. So this figure here is just to kind of show the fluctuation over time in relevant weather variables for reindeer herding in Norway. So these are trends based on global climate models and based on 3 climate scenarios that are usually used in the literature. So you have a change over time in the onset of spring to the left, and number of days with the conditions for icing to the right. So it's just to show how this fluctuates over time. And also depending on the scenario, right? So if this is a Paris, most optimistic scenario, there is less icing, still fluctuating. And if you have the business as usual scenario, we do nothing with the carbon emissions, you have a more extreme weathers and more icing, which is negative for. But you treat this phi as a kind of a constant parameter, just shifting it, and then it stays on that level. So that is kind of a simplification that you make. But is there anything else to say about how this simplification affects us? So what are the limitations?
Yeah, so I think one of the limitations is that we have not thought how in nature this allelopathic impact can decrease, right? Because the burning crockery is a human intervention. So in any chance or in any cases that the ecological dynamics itself, is there any factors that can decrease this parameter phi, that we can just facilitate those like natural capital, or like those other species, such that we don't have to burn crockery. So that's what I have not thought. So that is also the limitation of the simplification. So we only think that the more climate change will going on, like the business as usual, and thus the phi will increase. So that is only one way going without turning, for example. Whereas, there should be fluctuations and can be differences through years, and can be more or less based on maybe some other factors that implied, but not modeled or not thought yet. So those are limitations.
Like the earlier onset of spring, for instance, do you know if that increases crowberry encroachment, if it has a direct effect on this phi parameter?
Yeah, well, what I remember is that, but I have to check the literature again. What I remember is that not only the onset of springs, but it can also be that because of climate change, that the crockery excretes more substance, like the allelopathic impacts, and then thus the seedlings of other vegetation which are not evergreen cannot regrow again. But this one is evergreen, so it's just staying there and being green and just encroaching all the land of other species. Yeah,
that's true. Okay, so here is your model. So now you introduce this upper letter T. Here is the burning effort, and you have the upper letter F, which is the feeding effort, and you've talked about it already. So we can just
Yes.
move on. But this is the model that we are looking at in this paper. And then you have the social planner. So this is the objective function of the social planner, maximizing discounted net benefit of reindeer herding when taking these feeding costs and burning costs into account. And you also add this gamma times R, which is
The non-use value.
called non-use value.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to ask you, because one alternative way of posing this decision problem would be to assume that this is a reindeer herding community deciding on the optimal S, F, and T. So what kind of assumptions would you have to make if this were to be a reindeer herding community?
Yeah, so I think if it would be a reindeer herding community, so that means that comprises of a lot or like many reindeer herders, and then so that there might be so the assumptions must be that they are governed, so there should be a body that all the herders follow, and and then also the assumptions are that the optimal decision should be need to be agreed by all of the reindeer herders, so else that will be that we cannot do it, right? Yeah, and also maybe that the way that each of the CEDA or each of the reindeer herders value the non-use value of reindeer should need to be the same, right? And then also the same cost for slaughter, for example, because that might be that they can value a bit different, especially with the gamma parameter.
Yeah. So and also, so you were talking about negative externalities in your trial lecture. So it's you have these common property pastures. So you would have to assume that the herders cooperate, they coordinate how many animals they have.
Yeah. Agree with each other,
to internalize these externalities, just as you were talking about in the lecture. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was one assumption, and also one thing you point to in your paper is that the burning is a public good.
Yes.
Because once you burn, at least how the way the pastures are regulated today, you cannot really exclude others from using that the burned or regrown pasture.
Yes.
Yeah. So that also would have to be solved, of course.
Yes. Yes.
So there are some issues underlying here.
I agree.
But you consider the social planner who kind of takes all, have kind of internalized all externalities.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah.
So when it comes to this, you interpret this gamma times R, the non-use value, as a cultural value, which I think is very relevant to include, although you skip it or you ignore it in the numerical part of your analysis, as I understand it.
Yeah.
But I think it's relevant to include it in the model.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know why you exclude it in the numerical part, but
so actually that I included in the appendix, that I still put a value for, but it's in the last page.
Yeah.
So
then
yes.
So, but you also mentioned that this could be kind of a social status value. Do you think it's, or have you thought about it, whether it's reasonable for a social planner to account for this social status value?
Yeah, you know, now you bring it out, I think it's correct, because usually a social planner is the government, and that will not be the social status of of the government, right? So maybe it is non-use value, but not really linked to social status, or else that the social planner is, as you say, a community of herders. Yeah, but it's also no. Yeah, so I think the non-use value here can be like all the cultural values for like conservation of the husbandry more than the social status, or else we will have different stakeholders that have different size of herds, and then social status can be accounted for. Yeah, so I agree with this.
I think if I were to decide, I would interpret it as a cultural value. But that's because I'm thinking that if this is a social status value, it's kind of if I have a larger herd than you, then it's a positive value for me, a negative value for you, and maybe it's cancels out.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I just wanted to hear if you had any reflections on it. But again, this cultural value. So you specify it as a function of the reindeer size of the reindeer population. Can you think of any other factors that can be relevant for if you think about this if you think about reindeer herding as a way of sustaining Sami culture? Is it the size of the reindeer population? Is that the only variable that could be included in this cultural value function?
No, it can also be the cultural value is also linked to. It can also link to how the percentage of slaughter, for example. Because like slaughtering calf or not, but we don't have a sex structure here.
So I was thinking more like I told you earlier that this burning and feeding, if you feed a lot, it changes how you actually do the herding. Perhaps the size of the pasture or the vegetation, the amount of vegetation, the wheat. Is perhaps just as important as the size of the reindeer population, so that you're able to do this migration.
Yeah, also like the amount of feeding effort, right? Because if they feed a lot, then if it always max the like if they have to feed, let's say two thirds of the days in a year, so then it will change the cultural value of the husbandry as before, because the reindeer will be kept and not will graze around anymore.
I find this really interesting. So it's so I think this is also something that you could think about doing something, extend
the model
into another paper.
Thank you.
So this phi value, you have these three scenarios. The pre-encroachment where this phi is 0, it's kind of without climate change, and then you have climate change where you set this phi value to 0.8. So why do you assume 0.8?
So of course we don't have a lot of data to see to measure exactly to do the regression and measure exactly or like to estimate the exact value of phi. But then we have some studies that we have, like for example, we have some studies that have 1,000 of plots, and then we measure how many plots that have crowberry, and it was around 70 to 80%. So that's why I was thinking that maybe we choose 0.8 as the value for phi, because that's the only data that we have available that is published for now. But so as also Martin also posed the related question. So there needs much better data to estimate this parameter. Better.
Yeah, that's great. So do you have any kind of thought about how serious this? phi equal to 0.8, is that a serious climate change, or
Yeah.
is it moderate, or?
Personally, I think I think the value is more than moderate. It's more of a serious problem. Even though that the herders are not really totally aware of that, but then there are a lot of pastures that are lost by crop encroachment. So I think that it is not very serious comparing to like climate variations or like winter pasture crisis, but then in future that it can be reach the critical point, for example. Yeah.
And you found that with this phi equal to 0.8, for instance, if you just look at the slaughter profit there, it reduces by 40%, which is quite severe.
Quite severe. So profit slaughter profits reduced by 40. Because one thing is that I don't include all of the compensations or subsidies in. I just only include some subsidy, but not all. So that might lead that the impact of crop encroachment might seem severe. But if we include the subsidy, for example, the climate subsidies in, and there might be that, but then the profit will not solely from slaughtering reindeer, right? But then is more of all the values of the herd. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I'm a co-author on another paper where we find a reduction in profit. I mean, it's a different model, but a reduction in profit up to 30% in this business as usual scenario. Okay. So it's not
as 40%
far away. Yeah. So, but it seems to be like a severe climate change.
Or maybe that my model is still quite simple, and because of some calibrations of the parameters, that make the reduction in profits a bit different, or like much larger than what you have found.
Yeah. But it's interesting to kind of think about the results. What does it mean? Is it a big change? Is it, reflect on it? So maybe we should just move on.
Yes.
I think I just dropped this one. So when you have this adaptation scenario where you have burning and feeding, you find that when you increase the phi parameter above 0.8, that burning effort increases and feeding effort reduces. So the burning is preferred over the feeding. So if we turn back to this cultural value again, so how would if you were to include kind of a broad cultural value, how would this affect your results, do you think?
Yeah, I think that if the results of the numerical application is that burning is preferred over than feeding, then it is necessary for the herders for the government to subsidize and increase burning for crowberry. So thus then that supplementary feeding will not be the sole solution in the future, and that will also help in the face of the conservation more the traditional way of practice. Yeah.
So if you think about these sustainability goals for reindeer herding, is the ecological sustainability, economic sustainability, and cultural sustainability. I think this kind of the burning of crowberry is very interesting because it works in the direction of them all.
Yeah. I must admit
in contrast to feeding, maybe in contrast. It's me speculating a bit, but
yes. No, maybe that when we did the modeling, we think most of the economic sustainability and ecology sustainability, but not much of the cultural side, and it comes later in the project, or like when I doing it more later on. So That should be one big perspective that we should improve the model and include them explicitly to see how
extend it.
extend
I
it.
mean, it's not that it is. I mean, the fact that your model makes us think and reflect. I mean, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so then the last one, and we have already done a lot of the questions now because the topic is the same. Okay, so I will not spend this much time on the last paper. So let's just so again. So now you add, and Martin said so as well. You add this carbon value. It's a very nice extension. It's really, really interesting. So the system is the same. You have vegetation, you have crowberry, you have reindeer, and you have a social planner, but you also have this carbon value of vegetation and crowberry. That's really interesting, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have some questions, but we can skip this. We can talk. I can tell you later. It's all about the way you pose things in related to your research questions that I maybe have some questions about. But now you can just briefly tell me, because this you don't do in your paper or in your thesis. You don't refer to the previous paper, and you don't discuss really why you make different assumptions, which I think you should do before submitting your paper to a journal, right? So, for instance, this is the reindeer herding, reindeer population dynamics. Which is formulated differently in paper 3 than in paper 4. So I just want you to tell me briefly why you choose a different approach and if it has any impact on your results.
Yeah. So so on the third paper, I have the second and third one. I have the term of supplementary, the increase in reindeer population by supplementary feeding is a singular term different out, and also S is a slaughtered number. And then the thing is that one of the problem when we solve dynamic optimization is that we have the singular S control, and then so that to do optimal control with the code I was learned, and then I discussed with Suzanne. Then it should be that we find some ways to avoid that problem. So that's why that we change into minus SR. So S now is not the number of slaughtered reindeer anymore, but it's the percentage of the herd to be slaughtered. And then later it goes a bit closer to the age herd structure, the age sex structure, because then how many percentage of the herd you slaughter, even though I don't explicitly model the calf and the simla and the ox. And also with the beta FR is that we include beta F.
Not the percentage, it's a rate. It can go to infinity.
It's a rate. Yeah. Sorry, it's a rate. And then with beta F is that we're just afraid that if we put plus beta FR outside, it might go very high, and it's not really practical that we just feed the reindeer. So it also can break. So we include the beta FR in the intrinsic growth rate. So that we did an additional assumption that with feeding, that reindeers may grow a bit faster, but a bit different with the third paper.
But you see this as an improvement, actually.
Yes.
Okay. So when it comes to the decision problem of the social planner, it's also a bit different. So, of course, you have these carbon values, but you also have a finite planning horizon. So I just want you to tell us briefly about the difference between having an infinite planning horizon as you have in paper 3 and the finite horizon as you have here. And you can also interpret these end values.
Yes. So about with the infinite planning horizon, that it fits more with that. We assume that the reindeer husbandry will just go on and on and on, and so we have the equilibrium in the future, and then we also expect that it conversions from different initial conditions. But with the finite planning horizon, is because that for now, because of climate change and because things different, so there are a lot of parameters that are fixed ecologically and also price. But then if we put it in the infinite planning horizon, the things might not be correct anymore because we don't increase in price, for example, or like the intrinsic growth rate might change, for example, or even the allelopathic impact rate is still fixed. So that we chose a finite planning horizon. And also with burning crabbery, we also, even though that the finite planning horizon will have a bit of mismatch with what the Sami herders think of the husbandry. But then if we manage things in finite planning horizon, also means that we need to get something done. For example, in controlling, in burning crabbery, we cannot just burn and burn and burn in more than 30, for example, 50 years and 70 years, and we also a lot of cost, and it will be a new way of practice that every year the herders have to burn, and now to be a new tradition, for example. So that's why I chose it a finite planning horizon. Yeah. Yeah, and the final value terms of RT and VT. Of course, in here I focus more on V of capital T. Is that the end value of vegetation? And why in the graph in 30 years there's a lot of changes, ups and downs, is because there's no article saying that what is the price of the grazing pasture in 1 kilogram of biomass. So then I just put it equals to 1. And then later I found out that I did wrote in the discussion that the price may be too high. It should be 0 point something, for example, to avoid those too much bumps up in the end. But the V of capital T is the vegetation scrap value. So which means that in the end time, what is the value of the of 1 unit of V, of 1 unit of vegetation? So this also put in more so that is the social planner also cherish and also appreciate more the value of the pasture, because if in infinite horizon, then we assume that V of capital T equals to 0. So this has no value, or the social planner doesn't have to care about the value of vegetation in the end.
So maybe I just skip this and this one as well, even though this one I have to ask you about.
Yes.
So because you separate in your numerical analysis, you separate between the case where you include the end value and when you don't include the end value. So can you just tell me in this case, this is a 30-year scenario.
Yes.
So with no end value, you have a higher herding profit.
Higher herding profit.
Yeah. So the economy in reindeer herding is higher than when you take the end value into account. But still, you have this end value.
Yes.
Yeah. So would you say that the reindeer herders? So which?
It's hard to say because, of course, the reindeer herders cherish and value their land and their raising land. That's definite for sure. But then there will be no one who pay them for how many pasture it will be at the end of time for the pasture. And so that is some kind of like implicit or value. So then so the thing is that if they I think if in the long run and for a sustainable perspective, then even though that choosing the scenario with the end value vegetation V of T will give lower profit, but it may lengthen more the practice of it makes the pasture more sustainable because there is a value of pasture that the herders still value, even though they don't receive the money right in the bank account. So that's what I think.
So you had so when you have this carbon values included, you assume that the crowberry is more efficient in storing carbon. So you find that crowberry, the amount of crowberry increases.
Yes.
So there is less burning in this case, and you have less vegetation, a smaller reindeer population, and less profit. This is very intuitive based on your arguing.
Yeah.
You do a very good job arguing in your thesis, I think. Yeah. So to get the how the model works, but I found it a little bit confusing later on in your paper. So if you can just verify that this is the correct understanding, right?
Yes. So since we have with carbon, so we burn less carburetor, and carburetor increased compared to the other case without burning. So without carbon,
with no carbon
with no
value.
Carbon. Yeah. And so the vegetation decreased a bit comparing to that, and also render and profit.
Don't worry about the bullet point. I can show you this later.
Yeah.
Just.
So reducing the husband to profit, I think, is because that there's also the carbon price P2 here that I put it in the profit function, such that also that there is a source of like income, or like the source of values from carburetor encroach from carburetor as a biomass, as a natural capital. So such that of course then the render herding profit is decreased because it is optimal not to burn so much carburetor. So there's still burning going on, but not as extreme as the other case without carbon. Yes.
And I think, to me, this is also interesting because you can see this problem. It's a little bit similar to land use conflicts in pasture land, right? And we have seen a lot of examples where there is big conflicts. Between reindeer herders and other economic interests.
Yes.
Yeah. So and now, if you are to kind of think about crowberry as a source of carbon storage, it's another yet another type of conflict actually involved. It's a difficult. I guess it will be difficult to kind of justify a policy.
Or
what do you think?
Yes, because I think if we focus on the land that the reindeer husbandry is on, and if we take into account, of course it's very hard, but if we can take into account all of the things that creates values, then let's say supposedly we get a number, and then so that it can that number will help to like an optimal number to balance whether how much carburetor we burn in comparing to other land use conflicts from, for example, like even windmills or like infrastructure. But then of course then a lot of problems for the husbandry, and the government is paying a lot of subsidies, and then thus that we need to find some other ways that if the government doesn't have to pay so much subsidies, but a way of incentivize that for burning carburetor, then it is more sustainable than asking for more money if it is in the big picture of management of the region. If I understand the question correctly.
Yeah. But it also, I think all of this demonstrates that there is room for more research as well, which is fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we are supposed to end now. Yeah.
But we can talk more.
So thank you for
so much.
the discussion. Yeah.
Yes, I thank Dr. Anne Borge Johannessen for the interesting comments and discussion. I have not received any questions ex auditorio, so we proceed with the defense. Now it's the question to you. Do you want to say something? Concluding words? Scientific oath? Anything?
Yeah, no, I want to thank first is the university and the Norwegian Research Council for the chance of working with this project and also working with a very wonderful team, multidisciplinary team with Clay Armstrong and Karianne Boston and Maria Tuomis. I thank my supervisor and co-supervisors for that. I also thank the two opponents that you have bring a lot of thoughts for me, and there are a lot of rooms for improvement and for extension. And I also want to thank my family and my friends who have been always support and he's here, so thanks him for that. Yes, I guess there are a lot of others to thank, but I will send you a message later. Yes.
Thank you. On behalf of the Faculty of Biosciences, Fisheries and Economics and the UIT, the Arctic University of Norway, I thank the Scientific Committee for the doctoral defense and the successful fulfillment of your duties here today. Special thanks to the supervisors for guiding the candidate through his work. I also thank the audience for attending the defense. And last but not the least, I thank the candidate for all the work and effort he has put into a PhD project and the results he has achieved. The committee will now decide whether the candidate's defense has been satisfactory. The conclusion will be announced by the first opponent of the committee immediately after the short break. I ask the audience to remain seated until the committee returns to the lecture theater. You can stay, the candidate.
Oh, yeah.
You can stay here.
You join us.
I'd love to. Can you turn it off? Turn it off.
Yes, very short breaks are very positive. So you can take this. Yes, we are now all back to hear the final announcement from the committee. First opponent, Professor Martin Kos. Will you please present the conclusion from the evaluation committee?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the scientific discussion. This is really has been a pleasure for us. This is kind of the thing why we love our job, to engage on high-level discussions that provide new insights. Thanks a lot for this. This was uncontroversial. I think we all expected this to be a pleasant scientific discussion, and that is how it was. You have heard before that we found the thesis worthy for awarding the doctoral degree. The lecture this morning was also approved, and the defense as well. So congratulations, you have the approval of the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does the second opponent want to say something, or is it? It's okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and many thanks to the committee. Finally, I wish to congratulate the PhD, Philosophy Doctor in Social Sciences, Minh Nhat Pham. We are at the faculty immensely proud of you. Thank you for your efforts. And now you have the 3 magical letters after all for your name. Right. I ask now the audience to remain seated until the candidate and the committee has left the room. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
Is it off? Oh, sorry. So sorry. Down at it, down at it, down at it.
Well done.